obviously, the federal government does have limited ability to control the states. But, you were talking about how things are, there is more awareness. Like, I got to assume that, if the U.S. government is doing a diplomatic boycott of the Olympics because of genocide, state governors have to be like, I wonder if something's not right about China.
Does this mean we're allowed to talk about how we should have a full boycott, not just a diplomatic boycott? Can we go to that real quick?
Oh, do we want to pull the trigger on the... Yes!
It's just, a diplomatic boycott is not a real thing. Like, if we're going to boycott, we should just boycott.
Well, and the counter argument to that is, of course, then we're punishing athletes, right? So how would you respond to that?
Yeah, that's really hard. It would be terrible for the athletes, and I would feel terrible for them. We've done it before. Also, you know what I would really love to watch? Would be like an alternate Olympics among and held by countries that aren't committing genocide.
We've actually, been on our show encouraging the Chinese government to support the Olympic boycott because then they can win all the medals.
Yeah, there we go. You can choose between watching two different Olympics. One is China and genocide committing countries against themselves, and the other non-genocide committing countries. That seems great.
Yeah.
And I think we know which one the IOC would prefer to work with.
They're not political, Matt. They don't take sides. They're all about using sport to bring people together. Don't ask anything about Peng Shuai. She's fine. Mm-hmm. But I do think it's interesting. I totally understand the argument that a diplomatic boycott is not enough. However, I have to say, at least it's something because...
We're used to nothing.
We were looking at the 2008 Olympics and looking for old photos from the 2008 Olympics, and there's George W. Bush yucking it up with Bill Gates and Gordon Brown, the UK Prime Minister at the time, and David Beckham is there, and the Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd is there. Everybody having a great time together in Beijing. So that is definitely worse than what's happening now, but there could be more done.
Yeah, I think what makes me just so activated on this, though, is reading about China or Chinese writings on the 2008 Olympics and how much that helped their global posture and their ability to influence the global system. And it's just how can we do that again? Have we learned nothing from the past decade and a half?
What do they say about that?
So there's the obvious stuff of the Olympics are a source of national prestige. And so by hosting them, it became clear that we're an international leader, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also discussion about the corporate partnerships, including with advanced technology companies that were formed, through and as part of the Olympics. And therefore that gave Beijing access to, a number of new technologies, including technology that can be used for surveillance purposes, and almost certainly is, because if you're partnering with a big tech company on, crowd control systems for the Olympics, that's something that you can use more broadly in your surveillance state. Then there's also this whole line of argument about how hosting the Olympics helped China to form, to foster, and to take advantage of relationships with international media outlets, and how that can be used in the future or could be used in the future to disseminate Chinese propaganda.
Yeah. Well, it's another one of those things. They just say it and nobody pays attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is we weren't around then, so we didn't know how to get all that Chinese money. So we just went in the wrong direction and started being critical of the CCP.
Oh, man. I do have to say that it's pretty funny to hear the last 2 points that you talked about because, that I think that's something we don't consider. I did not know about the surveillance, for example. And while it's kind of pretty clear how the Chinese regime uses foreign media as part of their propaganda, to hear them spell it out like the Olympics were great for us for this, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, which then makes me think something like NBC not showing the Olympics would be another step up from just a diplomatic boycott.
Yeah. Well, but NBC already has spent the money to get that 2022 Olympics contract. So they're not going to back out of like $1 billion deal.
Also, the Women's Tennis Association also had a bunch of money invested in China, and they pulled out.
Yeah, that's like a impressive and thoughtful thing for them to do.
It's also just amazing that NBC doesn't seem to be being called out at all, right? Like there's been all this pressure on the U.S. government. There's pressure on IOC, but nobody's out there saying, hey, how about you, NBC? Like, does it bother you to be doing this?
Yeah, in a sense, they're showing propaganda.
Exactly. You're amplifying Chinese propaganda to the international community. Isn't that a little bit weird?
Yeah, well, joke's on them because no one cares about the Winter Olympics.
That's probably the best argument against the boycott out there.
I do have to say that, it's not just NBC. It's also all of the companies that are going to be putting ads on or sponsoring, the coverage of the Olympics.
Recently we were talking to somebody about how, Coca-Cola was lobbying against the Uyghur slave labor bill. And it was like, well, why is Coca-Cola involved in that? Like, they're not going to be affected by that. It's not like Coca-Cola is made in Xinjiang. But it turned out that the Communist Party was putting pressure on Coca-Cola to lobby. Otherwise, they would, give Coca-Cola a hard time elsewhere in China. It's just, again, and I think Coke is an Olympic sponsor. It's just another way that the Communist Party can make all of these connections with big American businesses that then also have a lot of influence over U.S. government on a federal and local level.
Yeah, and just a similar thing of here are nodes within the U.S. system, whether those are big businesses or whether those are state and local governments, that if you make sure that they are dependent on China, are going to serve as avenues for whatever agenda China has.
Do you guys remember back in the beginning of COVID, there was that state legislator in Iowa, was it Idaho, who the local Chinese consulate tried to get him to praise the Chinese government's handling of the coronavirus?
No, I vaguely remember something.
We interviewed him on our show on China Unscripted,
but
I can't remember which state this was.
I thought it was Wisconsin.
It's possible, but
all the states in the middle kind of blend together for me.
But the point was that they were going to the point of contacting state legislators to try to get them to do some kind of soundbite that they could use for propaganda, right?
But this state senator basically told the CCP to go pound sand.
Yes, but it became news because he did that. That was not the norm, right? Yeah. Or we don't know if anybody actually took him up on it, but nobody is the very few people are saying this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's a scary thing. We don't actually know how often, China uses these connections to ask local officials to do something, and they do.
Right. I mean, the thing we especially wouldn't know about is if they ask a state or local official to just not say something, and then you never know.
The only cases we get are the ones where someone actually puts his foot down. That must be 1 in a million.
Yeah, in your report, you said something about that China, U.S., the state legislatures, that forum is not really that well documented, right? We don't really know a lot about what went on there.
Exactly. And of course, it's possible that means it's a non-thing, but I'm more inclined to believe that means that simply no one's paying attention, and therefore that it's a black box of whatever deals it is China's trying to make.
Yeah, I mean, they will go. I remember many years ago hearing from some human rights activists in California, I think, about how local, they were trying to get their local city mayors to speak up about issue proclamations condemning China's human rights violations, and then the Chinese consulate actually tried to put pressure on the mayor of Santee, California, something like that, to not issue these proclamations. It's crazy the level that they will go to try to suppress negative things towards the Chinese government or to promote them.
And it goes back to the whole centralized thing, or fragmented thing, I guess, and then the centralized by contrast. They have a very clear agenda. Every branch of the Chinese influence campaign in the United States is out to achieve the same thing. And so, the second any effort in the opposite direction comes up within our decentralized system, they're going to, in a very dedicated way, put pressure to make sure it doesn't happen. And meanwhile, we don't have anything approximating that. And in fact, our system means that when there is an effort, you can break everything else away from it.